I have been playing quite a bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, and over the years of my time with this game, one of the main decks that I have played is the Lightsworn archetype. Pure Lightsworns, we're keeping it pure, we're not making it exactly a Twilight deck. We have a couple cards sprinkled in here and there, but today I am going to be walking through you guys my deck profile for the Lightsworns in the Genesys format. Out of all of my decks that I play with, this is my best one. I'm confident in this build. I'll walk you through exactly what I'm doing, and as always, I would love to know what you guys think about the deck. If there's anything that you think that I should add, I would love to play test things, okay? Let's get started with the cards. Punishment Dragon, 1 copy, 3 copies of Judgment Dragon. Judgment Dragon, of course, the staple of the deck. Punishment Dragon, we never use. We just have Punishment Dragon in the build because we have the fusion monster between the two, but just still. Nowadays, it's incredible to me because prior to getting into Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, there was a few things within Lightsworns that I wasn't really familiar with, and then I had to, learn the brand new Lightsworn cards. They're so good. It is so easy to get access to Judgment Dragon now, and you don't even need to rely on, a beckoning light to get this thing back from the graveyard. Judgment Dragon sees so much play. I've seen people talking about using 2 copies of Judgment Dragon, but 3 is almost, non-negotiable for me. I love Judgment Dragon. Let's continue on to a couple more boss monsters of the deck. Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, and Light Ray Diablos. You know what's funny? Okay? The reason these two are in the deck, obviously, they're very, very easy to get out, okay? But the funny thing is about this, I find myself not really using these cards as much, but when you do get these cards out, their effect is, good enough to the point where I don't want to sacrifice anything else in the deck. I don't want to remove it and replace it with anything else. And we're going to talk about some cards that have also been playtesting with this deck, but are officially not in the deck. But these are 2 other boss monsters, other options. I've always been a big fan of cards too, like Light Ray Diablos, for example, where you have a card where you can place a card on the top of your opponent's deck. I've always really liked that. Blackluster Soldier's couple effects here is always coming in handy too. Let's continue on to the next cards over here. 1 copy of Gorz, the Emissary of Darkness. I feel like over the years, this has been a major staple within the Lightsworn builds. There's a lot of times where you do find yourself with no cards on the field, but there's also a lot of times where you just flat out mill this thing, but it's good to have in the deck. Let's get into the actual Lightsworns over here. We have 3 copies of Wolf, 1 copy of Garoth. Now, something that you might notice about my build, and something that I've always done over the years with Lightsworns, is I have always, historically, okay, before we ended up getting this new Lightsworn support and I ended up learning about all these new cards, I always had at least 1 copy of every single Lightsworn. I ran even just a copy of Shire, and nobody ever runs that card, just so you have easier access to Judgment Dragon. And I was also running Dragonith, or Graganith, however you pronounce it, where it matters how many Lightsworns that you have in your graveyard with different names. Nowadays, you don't need that, but still, I always prioritized the quickest possible way to summon Judgment Dragon. So I'm always having a bunch of different names with the Lightsworns. Garoth isn't the best card in the world, and actually, now in Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, with a little bit more of the modern game and the modern cards, I don't really find myself using Garoth's effect really all of that much. But it is another Lightsworn, it is another name. I like the 1850 for a 4-star. It comes in handy, but I would not blame you at all if you did not want to use Garoth. But Wolf, you mill it, you summon it. I love this card. Let's continue on to Jane the Lightsworn Paladin and 2 copies of Raiden Hand of the Lightsworn. So I've played with 3 copies of Raiden Hand of the Lightsworn. I no longer feel it's necessary to have 3 because back in the day when I was playing this, Raiden was the best monster. It's a 4-star tuner. You get to mill twice, and at the end phase, you get to mill twice as well. Jane's just another quick name to get into the graveyard. Jane is almost I don't want to say useless now, but I do still want those really, really, really quick names to get to the graveyard as fast as possible, because you'd be shocked when you start sprinkling in a Garoth, when you start sprinkling in a Jane, how fast you get 4 monsters in your graveyard for Judgment Dragon. And now, with the easy access that you have to Judgment Dragon, you're getting this bad boy out all of the time, okay? So Jane's essentially useless, but Raiden is your 4-star tuner. It still is a good card, but now there's better tuner monsters to talk about when it comes to Lightsworns, okay? 1 copy of Lila, Lightsworn Sorceress, 1 copy of Aaron, the Lightsworn Monk. I like Lila. She's always an option to blow up a spell or trap card. I would rather have her and a name with the Lightsworn, and plus you can summon her back to the field all the time. She's searchable. I like having this better than I have, and something that we're going to be talking about is Galaxy Cyclone. I've always been a big fan of that card. I'd rather have this than a spell or trap that gets rid of spell or trap cards on the field, okay? And Aaron? You'd be surprised about how often this thing comes in clutch. I love it. Just, yeah, attack a defense position monster, it goes away. You don't even need to do damage calculation. You don't need to deal with it. Well, sometimes you need to deal with effects, but you get my point. I love this card. It is very, very sneakily useful, and just, you know, to have that option to just mill it into the graveyard, and then it's like, okay, you know what, I can summon an Aaron with a Lumina or something like that. It's a sneaky good card. I've always liked Aaron. She's obviously not as useful as she was in previous formats. I'm talking about like the old days when Lightsworns ended up coming out. I was always playing this deck, but she still does find use in my opinion, okay? Let's continue on to two of the best cards in the deck. We have 2 copies of Fearless Lightsworn Archer and 1 copy of Lightsworn Dragonling. Lightsworn Dragonling is one of the new best Lightsworn cards out there. It has multiple effects. It's a 4-star. You can use you find that you can usually use this thing for whatever level 8 synchro monster that you want, or overlay. I usually go for a Minerva and things like that. This is the star of the deck. I think that you need 3 copies of this. And Fearless, you know how I was talking about how there are actually better tuner monsters to use than Raiden? I've playtested having 3 Fearless Lightsworn Archers. I like Wolf a little bit better because it has the 2100 attack. Fearless is okay, and I know the Fearless has an additional effect. I've just liked 3 Wolves, 2 Fearlesses. That's how I found success running with these 2 things, but Fearless is also a very, very, very good card. If you want 3 Fearlesses and 2 Wolves, I don't blame you one little bit. I personally like the attack points, okay? Let's continue on. 2 copies of Honest, 1 copy of Electromagnetic Turtle. Dude, prior to me learning and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, I had no idea Electromagnetic Turtle existed. It's perfect for a Lightsworn build. You mill this thing all the time, and you get 1 free, alright, your battle phase is over effect. It's phenomenal. And how can you not run Honest? I don't feel that 3 copies of Honest is necessary. Historically, we would run 3 copies of Honest, but it's good enough, man. I'm also playing 1 copy of Beckoning Light. You can get the Honest back if you really want the Honest. It comes in handy, but I'm finding that there's a few cards that have been like almost staples within the Lightsworn decks are no longer like that, because the deck holds its own now with all of the different things that you can do. One of the new stars of the Lightsworn deck is Wayest Lightsworn Archfiend. This card is also phenomenal, dude. It's a 4-star tuner, very easy to get out, multiple effects. This thing is what is making Lightsworns, this and Lightsworn Dragonling is what's making Lightsworn decks really that powerful. And if I'm having success as an old Yu-Gi-Oh player, depending on who you are watching this video, I'm an old player who's learning his way through the modern game. If I'm having success with this Lightsworn deck and this new support, that really says something about the deck. This card's phenomenal. Just like we were talking about Lightsworn Dragonling. 3 copies, non-negotiable. And then we have Arcturus Lightsworn Druid. It's a little bit, mostly because it's another name to get into the graveyard quickly. But when you get this thing out, the effect also comes in handy. You have built-in protection for your Lightsworn monsters. You have your Lightsworn, you have protection from all the card effects, excuse me. I think it's a good card. Easy to get over with attack, but it's another name. It's a good card, definitely worth having in the deck, okay? Let's continue on. We have the 3 Luminas. 1 copy of Lumina the Twilight Sworn Shaman, and then we have 2 copies of Lumina the Lightsworn Summoner. Historically, I've always run 3 copies of Lumina. There's nothing wrong with that. I would not blame you if you even wanted to replace something that I've already talked about, like a Jane or a Groth with a 3rd copy of Lumina. I get that. I found it fine with 2. I like having the 1 option with the other Lumina the Twilight Sworn Shaman's effect. I found this to work. Both Luminas, I mean, it does it does equal out to be 3 Luminas, but this is the way that I personally found success with them. It's so weird nowadays. Lumina is no longer the big baddie of the Lightsworn archetype, you know what I mean? It used to mean like when Lumina was limited, like that Lightsworns got hit pretty hard. Now I'm not even thinking about running 3 copies of Lumina. It's so strange to think about, man. Let's keep going on. Dude, Ryko, the Twilight Sworn Fighter, you would be surprised how often this effect comes into play. I love it, and I love it so much more than the first Ryko. Flip effects are basically useless nowadays. I love, 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 love that you get the effect when it's flip summoned. You usually can get its effect off, and then it comes in really handy, man. This thing is a very, very sneaky good card, and I'm definitely keeping it in the deck over here. Let's continue on to the spells over here. We have 3 copies of Solar Recharge, 2 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade. Charge of the Light Brigade is one of the cards that cost points in the deck, and I'm comfortable with 2, which is so strange again, because it used to be like, all right, you need 3 copies of Lumina. You need 3 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade. Now I'm comfortable with 2. And with the points, we're falling, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, I should have had that for you. With the points, we're falling somewhere around 89, 90. Charge of the Light Brigade, I would even be okay with 1, to be honest with you, but we had the points to spare, and you can't, like, Charge Light Brigade's still a great card. Solar Recharge as well. With all the Lightsworns that we're running in the deck, you rarely don't have a target for this thing, so both spell cards are good. Both spell cards are staples for the deck. Now, this is where my build gets a little bit more unique, okay? I've always been a fan of running pure Lightsworns, okay? I like having the 1 copy of Lightsworn Sanctuary. Is it a necessary card in the deck? No, but it comes in handy as a continuous spell, especially as we talk about, there's a little special field spell card that we're going to be talking about there too, where you can get the shine counters kind of not transferred from one another, but you can use both effects at once. I like having this. Most games, you end up just milling it, but on the odd time that you can activate it, you can get it going, you can get the counters going, I think it's pretty useful, to be honest with you, okay? And Moon Mirror Shield, I've gone on record throughout this entire channel talking about how much I love this card. It gets you over some monsters and some problems more often than you might think. It's an excellent card. It makes any of your monsters completely unbeatable. Even if you, like, use it on something that maybe you get an XYZ monster out, you've already used the materials and the monster's just kind of hanging around. Or I want to use it with, I found myself using it with Arcturus. That's not a bad way to use it too. Moon Mirror Shield is a staple in almost every single deck that I use, okay? Let's continue on to one of my other staples, and then Snatch Steal. I like Snatch Steal. I like taking my opponent's monsters. It costs very little points, and I had the points to spare. The problem with the spell cards is there's a lot of time where you mill the cards, but on the odd time that you really do get Snatch Steal, I found it to be very helpful. You can use it with overlays, you can use it with tuner monsters, you can use it just as your opponent's effects to take something away. I love it, man. And Dark Sanctuary. I will never not have Dark Sanctuary in the deck. You activate this thing, and you toss a coin to negate attacks and deal damage to your opponent. Very, 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 very good card. I love Dark Sanctuary, okay? Let's continue on to 2 more field spell cards over here. Realm of Light. This is what I was talking about with the shine counters. You can continue, and this is another thing where you'd be surprised about how much you end up raking in the attack points for all of your Lightsworn monsters, and then all of a sudden, you have yourself having a bunch of boss monsters, and your opponent, when they're summoning their 3,000 attack monsters, when they're summoning their 4,000 attack monsters, suddenly it's not so crazy for your monsters to end up reaching that. I think it's a good card, man. I like Realm of Light. I've mostly played them because I want to play the Lightsworn cards. I love the archetype. I love all of the cards. Why not run this card? And it's actually kind of helpful, but I do understand if you would rather replace them with something else, okay? Let's continue on to the one Lightsworn trap that we have, and Beckoning Light. Dude, I cannot believe that I'm running a build of Beckoning Light where it's just that 1 copy. You have enough searchers. You have enough Lightsworn monsters doing the work now. I would be okay with 0 copies of Beckoning Light, but I still do love to have that option where you can get rid of your entire hand and then just customize whatever you want from the graveyard back to your hand. And again, you have such easy access to Judgment Dragon nowadays that it's gonna be in your graveyard. And for the trap card, I like that you mill it, you said it. I wish that there were more Lightsworn cards like this, but this card isn't exactly, like, both of these cards don't really shine at all in the deck, you know what I mean? But they're good enough to keep around. They definitely have their uses, okay? Let's continue on over to the extra deck over here. 1 Enlightenment Dragon and 1 Centurion. I apologize for pronouncing that wrong. Legatia. Enlightenment Dragon, like I said earlier, that's the only reason we're running Punishment Dragon in the deck. It has its uses, and every once in a while, the Synchro Monster has its uses as well. I will say, out of everything in the extra deck here, I probably use these cards the least, but sometimes, like, they're worth keeping in because sometimes they are options, and then they end up, they're pretty powerful options, you know? Let's continue on to 2 cards that I use a little bit more, okay? We have the Draco Monster. This thing is nuts. This thing should cost points. Its effect is phenomenal. I find myself going for this card shockingly a lot. And Crimson Blader too, man. It's depending on what deck you're facing against. I love the fact that you can just stop your opponent from summoning level 5 or higher monsters. It comes in handy. I like Crimson Blader a lot, okay? I like both of these cards a lot. And this deck, it is very, very, very easy to get 8-star monsters out, or Synchro Monsters, excuse me, and it is very easy to get rank 4 overlays. You will find yourself, you know, deciding which card to end up summoning all of the time. Let's continue on to start a Spark Dragon and Minerva, the synchro version of Minerva. You know, both of these cards are good. Stardust Spark seems like it's a little bit beyond its time now, but I think the effects are good enough to just have it as an option. Minerva is one that I actually considered shuffling out for something else because there are so many times where I just go for a different monster. Say, kind of similar to Stardust Spark Dragon, but I want to have it as the option. I want to have its uses. The games go pretty quick now, so I don't find myself needing multiple copies of Crimson Blader and Draco if they end up getting destroyed. You know what I mean? Let's continue on to Michael and Ancient Sacred Wyvern. Dude, Ancient Sacred Wyvern, you would be shocked about how many times this thing just takes game. This thing, when I added this to the deck, I was like, you know what? I like the option. I could see some OTKs coming on over here. I find myself using this bad boy all the time. I love Ancient Sacred Wyvern. It can just finish people. At the very least, it can deal a massive blow to your opponent. And Michael the Arc Lightsworn, dude, another one of those cards that back in the day we'd be running 3 copies of this. You pay 1,000 life points, you banish a card, you get life points back, you get to recycle your Lightsworns. This card used to be so great, and it still is good. It's just shocking that I'm not going for it nearly as much, but it still is a great card. It's still an option out there that I would love to have, okay? And we continue on to Fortune Lady Every and Eclipse Twins. Eclipse Twins is a card that I've kind of been sprinkling into most decks. I find it pretty useful, especially when you have Minerva that we're going to be talking about, where you're just going through your overlays, and then all of a sudden you could just overlay something for the Eclipse Twins. Now, Fortune Lady Every. This thing is shockingly easy to summon because you do have the spellcasters in the deck, and I like the effect. I like the banish effect. I like the attacks raking up. If you guys have been following the channel, you might know I'm a big Fortune Lady fan. I've always tried to make that deck work, and I have decks that are okay. Maybe we'll walk you through some Fortune Lady builds that we have, but I'm happy that I can actually use a Fortune Lady card in a deck. Let's continue on to number 101 and Time Thief Redoer. Number 101 is a 4-star monster that I've always played. The option to just take your opponent's monster if there's something that's a little bit difficult to get rid of, I think it's excellent. On top of that, it has the built-in self-protection. And Time Thief Redoer, once I got back into this game, once I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, this is also a card that I've been sprinkling into most decks. It's a useful card. You can't go wrong with it in pretty well any deck. Let's continue on to 1 copy of Heroic Champion Excalibur and Minerva, the XYZ version of Minerva. Minerva is a card that I find myself going for a lot more often than a lot of your options over here. I find if it's early, I'll summon a Draco. You know what? Minerva's great too, but there's a lot of times where you can just flat out get both of them. My point being, I liked having the option, so you saw a bunch of 1 copies of the cards in the extra deck. Minerva, you need 2, and I would even consider doing 3. And for Heroic Champion Excalibur, I like the option to have its effect, but this is another card where I don't really find myself using it too often, but I like the option there to continue on, okay? That is the full deck. Now, I want to walk you through some cards that I've been playtesting, and throughout my time playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, I've had them in the deck, I've taken them out of the deck. Now I think I have the concrete build, and I'm not going to shuffle any of these cards back in, but these were options, and I'll tell you what I found useful and what I didn't, okay? Dragonith, sorry, I don't know why I said Dragonith. Dragonith, the Lightsworn Dragon, and the Ultimate Time Lord. I love both of these cards, and you know what's funny? I started off when I made this deck, I had 2 copies of the Ultimate Time Lord in this deck. It's an easy card to get out that's a 4,000 attack point monster. There was not one time, not one singular time that I've ever summoned this card, to the point where I'm like, why am I running this thing? And my logic was simple, okay, you have 10 or more monsters in your graveyard. How often does that happen with Lightsworns? All of the time. It just got milled, I never drew it, and it ended up being a brick, and it's not even just another Lightsworn card to have. And you have enough really strong Lightsworn cards to the point where you don't really need a 4,000 beat stick. That was my logic behind that. Okay, 4,000 attack, easy to get there, never use this card. And for Dragonith, the Lightsworn Dragon, it hurts, man, because I've always used this in Lightsworn builds. Always. I always thought it was a very underrated card. But it's kind of the same logic. You have enough big bad boss monsters now where it's not necessary to have this card in the deck. And now with all of the names, the attack points on this thing would go up and up and up and up and up. But now, I don't even really want to focus on tribute summoning a monster. There's not an easy way to get this thing out. I don't think it's that useful anymore. But it sucks because I've always loved having that card in the deck. Let's continue on. You have the number 39 Utopia and Utopia the Lightning option. Don't use it enough. I took it out of the deck. And for Dawn Knight, it's okay. Like, if you want to keep it in the deck, if you were someone to tell me, hey, I love using Dawn Knight in a Lightsworn build, I'd be like, oh, cool. Yeah, it's a good card. I didn't find it necessary. The Lightsworns are good enough on their own, and I don't need something like Dawn Knight included in the deck. That's not a card that I'm definitely going to put back, okay? Let's continue on to Lightsworn Barrier and Galaxy Cyclone. I've always loved Galaxy Cyclone over the years, and I've always loved Galaxy Cyclone, especially in Lightsworn builds, because if you mill it, it's no big deal, and you can still use its secondary effect. If you draw it, you get to pop a card. I'd rather just have the effect of Lila, and I have enough access to Lila that I don't need something like a Galaxy Cyclone. And for Lightsworn Barrier, you know, this thing ended up getting destroyed a lot. This thing was a lot better, dude. If I was talking about, like, in the Hat format or the Edison format, I'd be screaming from the rooftop about how underrated this card is. But now people destroy spell and traps a lot easier, and I know you could say the same thing about cards like Realm of Light, but their effects are a lot better than Lightsworn Barrier. You have some self-protection for some cards. Lightsworns all usually have a pretty good field presence. I don't feel that Lightsworn Barrier is necessary at all, but back in the day, that was a very underrated card. And of course, I also playtested Monster Reincarnation and Monster Reborn. Didn't need them. The Lightsworn effects were good enough, man. And, oh, look at this. This next card that we have over here is a suggested video, which you should check out. Another Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis deck build, and I would love to have you guys over there. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Take care, guys.